I guess I should start by saying that I thought I had it all. I'm Jake, 32 years old and married to Natalie, a vibrant woman who seemed perfect for me. We met 5 years ago at a mutual friend's party where she pulled me in with her laughter and sparkling eyes. We clicked instantly, and after 2 years of dating, I popped the question. Honestly, it felt like a fairy tale. We had a beautiful wedding, friends and family all around, and I thought we were embarking on a lifelong adventure together. But things started to change right after our honeymoon. At first, it was subtle, little things that I brushed off. Natalie was often on her phone, texting and laughing at messages I couldn't see. She started coming home late from work, claiming it was just more responsibilities piling up because of new projects. I wanted to believe her, so I did. I mean, who wouldn't want to trust their spouse, right? But deep down, something felt off. I remember one particular night when I came home early from work. I wanted to surprise her with dinner, maybe even open a bottle of that expensive wine we had saved for a special occasion. As I walked in, I noticed how quiet the house was. The lights were dimmed and the TV was off. I called out her name, but there was no response. I checked the kitchen, the living room, and finally I headed toward our bedroom. That's when I saw it, a pink envelope peeking out from under her pillow. I pulled it out and my stomach dropped. It was a letter from her ex-boyfriend, Ryan, a name I had heard her mention once or twice, always with a hint of nostalgia. The letter was full of flirtation, promises of rekindling their past, and a ridiculous invitation to meet up. I felt heat rush to my face. It was like a punch to the gut and I couldn't breathe. I shoved the letter back under the pillow and tried to process what I had just read. When Natalie finally came home, she was all smiles, completely oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. I put on a facade, pretending everything was fine while I mentally replayed the letter over and over. My heart was racing and I felt sick. I had to confront her. I needed to know the truth. Over the next couple of days, I watched her more closely. I observed her interactions, her laughter that felt too forced, and her sudden interest in girls' nights that seemed to pop up more frequently. I felt like I was spiraling, and every little thing she did pushed me closer to losing my mind. It was as if I was in a fog, unable to see clearly, yet the feeling of betrayal was pungent. Finally, the day came when I could no longer hold it in. We were sitting at the kitchen table and I glanced at her, feeling this overwhelming need to just blurt it out. I asked Natalie directly if there was anything she wanted to tell me about her past or anything she was hiding. The way she looked at me, her eyes darting away, told me everything I needed to know. That's when I dropped the bomb. I pulled out the letter and slapped it on the table. Her reaction was instantaneous, going from shock to anger in a heartbeat. "How dare you invade my privacy?" she yelled, her voice laced with venom. I expected tears, maybe some remorse, but instead I was met with a defensive fury. She began to fabricate stories, claiming that Ryan meant nothing, that it was just a silly letter from the past. She spun tales of how he was a part of her life before me, but all that mattered was us now. I wanted to scream at her to make her feel the weight of the betrayal, but I was too stunned to do anything but stare at her in disbelief. This was the woman I loved, the woman I married, and she was lying through her teeth. I felt this whirlwind of emotions, anger, hurt, betrayal, and it all crashed down on me at once. I scoffed at her excuses. I had never expected to be in this situation, and it felt surreal to see someone I trusted turn into a stranger. As we argued, the reality of our marriage began to crumble around me. I was no longer the same naive guy who believed in love and fidelity. I felt my heart shatter. I realized I had a choice. I could either let her lie and manipulate me, or I could take control of my own life. I took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of pain and resolve. I had to think about what I wanted moving forward. What was I willing to accept? What did this mean for us? The answers were unsettling, but I knew one thing: something had to change. Part of me thought about giving her another chance, but another part felt the sting of betrayal too deeply to overlook. I needed to gather my thoughts, figure out how I wanted to navigate this tangled web. I wasn't going to let this define me, but I also knew I had to defend myself against this emotional assault. The confrontation was just the beginning, and I could feel the tension in the air. I had no idea what was going to happen next, but I was determined to find out. After that explosive confrontation, I felt like I was living in a nightmare. Natalie stormed out of the kitchen, leaving me standing there, the letter still sitting on the table like a ticking time bomb. I could hear her moving around the house, slamming doors and throwing things. It was chaos, and I was the unwilling spectator. I walked to the living room where she was packing back and forth, her phone glued to her ear. I could hear her voice rising, talking to someone about how unfair I was being. I didn't cheat, it was just a letter, she insisted. The denial stung. My heart raced with indignation. How could she still twist this into something that blamed me? After she hung up, she turned to face me, her expression a mixture of defiance and desperation. "You don't understand," she shouted. "It was before you, it means nothing." "Nothing? You think a letter from your ex means nothing?" I retorted, my voice trembling. "You're still communicating with him and you expect me to believe it's innocuous. You're telling me you haven't been in contact with him since we got married." Her silence spoke volumes. She didn't respond, her eyes darting away from mine, which only fueled my anger. I wanted to scream at her, to make her understand how deeply she had hurt me, but instead I felt numbness creeping in. That evening we sat in silence, the weight of the betrayal hanging over us like a dark cloud. I contemplated my options, and I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. I had trusted her completely, and now that trust lay in ruins. I decided to take a step back and clear my head. I left the house and went for a long drive, emptying my mind of the chaos and trying to figure out what I wanted to do. As I drove, I thought about every moment we shared, all the memories that felt tainted now. I remembered how excited we were to start our life together, and now it felt like a cruel joke. After driving aimlessly for a while, I ended up at the park where we'd had our first date. The memories flooded back, her laughter, the way she looked at me when I held her hand. It felt so distant now, like a dream that had shattered. I pulled out my phone and began scrolling through our photos. I hesitated, then opened an album titled Our Adventure. The images of us smiling, laughing, and so in love gnawed at my heart. How could the woman in these pictures betray me so completely? That night I returned home, exhausted. Natalie was waiting for me, arms crossed, a scowl on her face. "Where have you been?" she demanded, her tone accusatory. "You can't just run from this." "It's not about running away. It's about trying to understand what's happening between us," I replied, my voice calm despite the turmoil inside. I was surprised by my own level of composure. "I need some time to think." She scoffed. "You think you can just walk away and pretend this didn't happen? You're being dramatic." "Dramatic? You're the one who had an affair. You're the one who received that letter and thought it was okay to keep it from me." I shot back, my patience wearing thin. The argument devolved into a shouting match, each of us hurling accusations and insults. But even as we fought, I could see the cracks in her facade. She was scared. I think deep down, she knew she had crossed a line, but her pride wouldn't let her admit it. When I finally went to bed that night, sleep was elusive. I tossed and turned, replaying the events over and over. I needed to find a way to regain control of my life. The emotional turmoil was exhausting, and I was terrified of what it meant for our future. The next morning, I decided I had to take action. I needed clarity, and that meant confronting the reality of our situation head-on. I reached out to a close friend, Mark, and told him everything. He was supportive and offered to come over to talk it through. When Mark arrived, he could see how shaken I was. "Jake, you deserve better than this," he said firmly. "This isn't just a simple mistake. You need to think about whether you want to continue this relationship or if it's time to walk away." His words struck a chord. I had been avoiding the possibility of ending things, but deep down I knew I had to consider it. I didn't want to be the man who forgave a betrayal. I didn't want to be the husband who let his wife manipulate him. As Mark and I talked, I found myself feeling lighter despite the heaviness of the situation. I realized I had more power than I thought. I could decide what happened next. Whether I wanted to forgive or to walk away, the choice was mine. After our conversation, I felt more resolute. I knew I couldn't allow Natalie's actions to dictate my worth. I had to take control, even if it meant diving into the painful process of ending our marriage. The following day, I confronted Natalie again. I sat her down and said, I need you to be honest with me. If there's anything else I need to know, now is the time to tell me. The tension in the room was palpable. I felt my heart pounding in my chest as I awaited her response. Would she come clean or would she continue to lie? Her reaction was telling. She hesitated, her eyes welling with tears, and for a moment I thought she might finally confess. But instead, she shook her head defiantly and said, You're being ridiculous. I've already told you everything. The finality of her words hit me like a brick wall. I realized in that moment I was done. I couldn't keep fighting for someone who wasn't fighting for me. I felt a wave of determination wash over me. I had to protect myself. I stood and looked her straight in the eyes. Natalie, I need to think about what I want moving forward. This isn't working for me anymore. She opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off. I can't continue living in a marriage built on lies. I'm done. Part of me felt a sense of relief wash over me, but another part felt a heavy weight settle on my heart. It was the end of an era, and I had no idea what was coming next, but I was ready to find out. After that conversation with Natalie, the atmosphere in the house turned even colder. I could feel the tension hanging like a thick fog, and the silence that followed our confrontation was deafening. My heart raced as I walked away from her, knowing I had taken a monumental step. I had made the decision to prioritize my own mental and emotional well-being, but it felt surreal. Days passed and I went through an emotional roller coaster. I was exhausted from the constant back and forth of feelings, anger, sadness, fear of the unknown. I started distancing myself, both physically and emotionally. I needed space to breathe and think things through. I moved into the guest room, making it clear that things had changed between us. The distance felt like a necessary boundary, a protective measure while I sorted out my feelings. During this time, I confided more in Mark. He was my sounding board, helping me articulate my thoughts and feelings. You deserve to be happy, Jake, he reminded me. You don't owe her anything, you need to put yourself first. His support was invaluable. I'd spend hours at his place, discussing everything from the betrayal to my hopes for the future. I began to see a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel, a future that didn't involve Natalie. I also started thinking about practical steps. I considered reaching out to a lawyer just to understand my options regarding a potential divorce. It was a daunting thought, but I knew I had to prepare for the worst. I didn't want to be blindsided. I wanted to be ready for whatever came next. One day, while I was at Mark's, I decided to check my phone. I had missed a couple of messages from Natalie, and as I read them, my heart sank. They were filled with apologies, mixed with anger and denial. You're overreacting, Jake. This isn't who I am. She wrote. Another message read, we can work through this. I love you, despite the hurt and anger I felt. A part of me couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt. I had loved this woman deeply, and it was tragic to see her unravel like this. But I also knew that love wasn't enough to fix what had been broken. I had to remind myself that her affection was entwined with her betrayal, and that I couldn't let emotions cloud my judgment. Then came the fateful day when everything exploded again. I had just returned home after a long day with Mark, feeling somewhat hopeful about the future. As I stepped into the house, the tension was palpable. Natalie was sitting on the couch, her expression unreadable. Can we talk? She asked, her voice shaky. I hesitated but nodded. She knew I was distancing myself and that I was taking the idea of ending things seriously. I sat down across from her, my heart racing. I made a mistake, she began, her eyes welling up with tears. I shouldn't have kept that letter. I was scared of losing you, scared of how you might react. Scared? You had a chance to come clean and you didn't. You chose to lie, I replied. Voice steady but firm. You've already broken my trust. She shook her head, desperate to convince me. I wasn't thinking straight. Ryan means nothing to me, I swear. It was just a moment of weakness. I rolled my eyes, feeling the anger bubbling up again. A moment of weakness? You call this a moment of weakness? You actually thought it was okay to keep in touch with your ex while we were on our honeymoon. She took a deep breath, her vulnerability on full display. I know I messed up. I didn't want to ruin what we had. I thought if I ignored it, it would go away. But it didn't, and I'm so sorry. As she spoke, I could hear the desperation in her voice. Part of me wanted to extend some grace, but the other part screamed that I couldn't let her manipulate me. I felt like I was on a tightrope, trying to balance the love I once had for her with the betrayal that was suffocating me. I don't know if I can forgive you, I finally said. This isn't just a simple mistake, Natalie. This cuts deep. I don't know if trust can be rebuilt after something like this. She began to cry and I felt the weight of her pain. She reached out for my hand, but I pulled away instinctively. It was too soon and I wasn't ready for that kind of intimacy. You can't just throw away our marriage because of one mistake, she pleaded. We had so many good times together. I need you, Jake. We can work this out, please. Her words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I wanted to believe her, but the doubt crept in. I shook my head, trying to suppress the flood of emotions. How can I trust you? I'll do anything, she exclaimed. I'll cut off all contact with him. I'll go to therapy. I'll do whatever it takes. In that moment, I felt a sliver of hope flicker inside me, but the thought quickly faded. I had to consider whether it was worth fighting for. I realized I had to put my feelings aside and think rationally. Maybe you can start with cutting off contact, I suggested cautiously. But I need time to think about whether I even want to try to rebuild this. She nodded, the desperation evident in her eyes. I'll do that, just please don't give up on us. I stood up, making my way to the door. I needed air. Natalie, I can't promise anything right now. I just need space to figure it out. As I stepped outside, I felt a mix of relief and confusion. The confrontation had left me reeling. I was torn between the love I had for her and the betrayal that gnawed at my insides. I knew I was at a crossroads, and now it was time to determine what path I wanted to take. I decided to call Mark. I need to talk, I said, my voice trembling. Of course, I'm here for you, he replied, grounding me. The conversation with him helped me to gain clarity about my feelings. I realized I had to stop allowing Natalie's pleas to sway me. I had to prioritize my own healing, and that meant deciding whether I was strong enough to forgive or if I needed to cut my losses. The emotional impact of her betrayal was starting to sink in, and I knew I had to get through this pain before I could think about what to do next. Each decision felt monumental, but I was determined to find a way forward. It was going to take time, but I was ready to face whatever came next. After the tense confrontation with Natalie, I spent the next few days in a daze, caught between hope and despair. I had given her a chance to prove she could change, but the reality of her betrayal weighed heavily on me. I felt like I was standing on shifting sands, unsure of where to place my feet next. I kept going back to Mark's place to talk things through. He was my anchor during this tumultuous time, and I was grateful for his willingness to listen without judgment. You know, he said one afternoon, you don't have to make a decision right away. You can take your time. Just because she's begging doesn't mean you have to jump back in. I nodded, appreciating his perspective. It was refreshing to hear someone validate how I felt. I didn't have to rush into a resolution. My feelings mattered, and I needed to prioritize my own healing before considering anything else. Meanwhile, Natalie was trying hard to convince me of her commitment to change. She sent me texts every day expressing her love and desperation. Some days they were heartfelt and sincere, other times they were angry and accusatory. You're being unreasonable, Jake, just give me a chance. She'd shout through text. It was exhausting. One evening I decided to check in on her. I knocked on the door to the guest room and she opened it, eyes wide with surprise. You came, she said, a flicker of hope lighting her features. I wanted to see how you were doing, I replied, stepping inside. The room felt heavy, filled with the weight of unspoken words. I've been thinking a lot, she said, her voice trembling slightly. I'm going to cut off all contact with Ryan, I promise. I realize now how stupid it was to keep that letter. I want to fix this. I wanted to believe her, but the defenses I had built were high. It's going to take more than just cutting off contact, Natalie. You have to understand the damage that's been done. I know, No, she said, her voice rising in desperation. But I love you, Jake. I can't lose you. I'm willing to do anything to prove it. In that moment, I caught a glimpse of the woman I had fallen in love with, the one who made me laugh and brought joy into my life. But the memories of betrayal loomed larger than those fleeting moments. I just don't know if love is enough right now, I admitted, feeling the sting of my own words. You've shattered my trust. Please, she begged, tears streaming down her face. Just give me a chance to earn it back. I'll go to therapy. I'll do whatever it takes. I sighed, the weight of my decision pressing down on me. I need time, Natalie. You've put me in a position where I have to think about what I want. I can't just jump back into this. Her face fell and I could see her processing my words. So what does that mean? Are we done? I don't want to say that yet, I replied, my heart aching. But I can't pretend everything is normal. It is. With that, I left the room, feeling torn yet again. I had made it clear that I needed space, but I could still sense her lingering hope. I returned to my own room, the weight of the world on my shoulders. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I thought about the future and what it might hold. What would it mean to stay together? What would it mean to walk away? I had heard stories of couples overcoming infidelity, but my situation felt different. The trust that had been the foundation of our marriage felt irreparably damaged. As the days passed, I found myself drawn back to the idea of seeking legal advice. I had to arm myself with information about my options. I needed to know what a divorce would entail, just in case I decided that was the best path forward. One afternoon, I made an appointment with a local attorney. As I sat in the waiting room, I felt a mix of anxiety and determination. The woman at the front desk called my name, and I followed her into a small office. The lawyer was a middle-aged man named Tom with a friendly demeanor that put me at ease. "So, Jake, what brings you in today?" he asked, his tone professional yet warm. I took a deep breath and laid out my situation. I explained the betrayal, the letter from her ex, and how I felt trapped between love and resentment. "I just need to know what my options are," I said, my voice wavering slightly. Tom listened intently, taking notes as I spoke. "Infidelity can complicate things, especially when it comes to divorce," he replied. "But it's not insurmountable. If you decide to move forward, we can work on the logistics together." As we went over the basics of the process, I felt a sense of empowerment beginning to take root. I was no longer just a victim of circumstances. I was taking control. I learned about the division of assets, potential alimony, and how child custody would be determined if we had children. Thankfully, we didn't, but it was a relief to understand what I could expect. By the time I left the office, I felt a little lighter. I didn't have to rush into a decision, but I had taken the first step toward taking control of my life. Armed with knowledge, I started to feel a sense of clarity. I went home that evening, feeling more resolved. The confrontation with Natalie was looming, and I knew it was time to lay my cards on the table. I needed to tell her what I had learned, and I needed to be honest about where I stood. When I walked into the living room, Natalie was watching TV, trying to distract herself. I turned off the television and she looked at me, surprise etched on her face. "Jake, what?" "Sit down," I said firmly. The gravity of my tone caught her attention and she obeyed, her expression shifting from surprise to concern. "I want to see a lawyer today," I stated, watching her reaction closely. Her eyes widened. "A lawyer? Why?" "Because I need to know my options, Natalie. I can't keep going on like this, pretending everything is fine," I explained, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "What does that mean for us?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It means I'm preparing for the possibility of divorce," I admitted, my heart pounding as the words left my mouth. Her face drained of color and she shook her head. "No, please, Jake, don't do this. We can fix this. I'll do anything." I took a deep breath, holding my ground. I'm not making any decisions right now, but I needed to take the first step for myself. I won't be manipulated into staying in a situation that feels wrong. Tears streamed down her face, and I felt a pang of sadness for the person she once was. "I'm so sorry, Jake. I never wanted to hurt you. I was scared." "I know," I said softly, but the empathy was tempered by my need for self-preservation. "But fear isn't an excuse for what you did. I need to know that you're fully committed to making things right. I can't keep living in uncertainty." "I'll do it. I'll go to therapy, I promise," she cried, her voice cracking. "Then start there. Show me you're serious. But understand that I need time to think," I replied, firm in my resolve. As I left the room, a heaviness settled in my chest. I had laid out my stance and I could feel the uncertainty hanging in the air. I had given her a chance to prove herself, but I knew deep down that loyalty was earned, not simply promised. In the days that followed, I kept my distance, focusing on myself and my healing. I had taken back control of my life, and I was determined to stay strong, no matter how difficult it was. I couldn't predict what the future held, but I was ready to face it, whatever it may be. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself in a strange limbo. I was going through the motions of life, work, gym, and the occasional outing with Mark, but everything felt tinged with an underlying sense of unease. I was caught in a web of conflicting emotions, oscillating between hope and despair. Natalie was trying hard to show me she was serious about fixing things. She had started going to therapy and made a concerted effort to reach out to me more. She would send thoughtful texts, trying to engage me in conversations about our past, reminiscing about happier times. I could tell she was trying to reconnect, but every time I heard her voice, it reminded me of the pain she had caused. It was like a haunting echo that wouldn't go away. One evening she asked if we could have a date night at home, cooking dinner together like we used to. I was hesitant. Part of me wanted to indulge in that nostalgia, to feel that connection again, but the other part screamed that things weren't okay. However, I figured it couldn't hurt to give it a chance. Natalie was excited, bustling around the kitchen while I tried to help. As we chopped vegetables and stirred sauces, there were moments of laughter and light-hearted banter. For fleeting moments, it felt like the old us. But then I'd catch a glimpse of her, and the memory of her betrayal lurked just beneath the surface. As dinner was served, we sat down at the table and I noticed her nervousness. She kept fidgeting, glancing at me as if searching for reassurance. "I really want to make this work," she said softly, her eyes pleading. "I've learned so much about myself in therapy. I hope you can give me a chance to prove it." I took a sip of my drink and looked her in the eye. "Natalie, it's going to take more than just words. I need to see real change, not just in you but in how we communicate. I can't just forget what happened." "I understand," she replied, her voice trembling. "I'm doing everything I can to rebuild your trust. I promise you I'll work on it every single day." The tension at the table was palpable. I tried to engage in conversation, but I felt a wall between us, built from the rubble of her lies. As the evening wore on, I could sense the weight of expectations hanging in the air. I wanted to feel a sense of reconciliation, but instead I felt more confused. After dinner, while cleaning up, I caught her staring at me with a mixture of hope and fear. "Jake, can I ask you something?" she said tentatively. "Sure," I replied, bracing myself. "If I really commit to changing, do you think there's a chance we could get back to how we were, the way we used to be?" Her voice was barely above a whisper, but I could hear the desperation woven into her words. Taking a moment to gather my thoughts, I replied, "I want to believe we can, but it's not just on you. It's also about whether I can forgive you. It's going to take time." She nodded, tears pooling in her eyes. "I'll wait as long as it takes. I'll do whatever it takes." But even as she spoke, I felt a flicker of doubt. How could I believe her? How could I trust her after everything that had happened? I wanted to be the man who fought for love, but I also wanted to be the man who protected his heart. As the night drew to a close, I felt a sense of melancholy settle over me. I cared for Natalie, but I also realized how fragile our relationship had become. I needed to reflect deeply on what I wanted. The next day, I went on a hike to clear my mind. Nature always had a way of grounding me, and I needed that space to think. As I walked through the trees, feeling the warmth of the sun filtering through the leaves, I contemplated my feelings. Should I give her a chance to redeem herself? The idea was tempting, but I worried I'd be sacrificing my own peace of mind to keep her happy. I thought about the love we once shared, the dreams we had built together. But then I remembered the betrayal and the pain that followed. That evening, I sought out Mark again. "I'm struggling with this," I admitted as we sat in his living room, surrounded by the comforting familiarity of friendship. "I see glimpses of the person I fell in love with, but I can't shake off the memories. I feel like I'm stuck in a loop." Mark nodded, understanding etched on his face. "It's okay to feel conflicted. You're human, Jake. It's part of the healing process. Just remember, it's about what you want, not what she wants." His words resonated with me. I realized I had been trying to accommodate Natalie's feelings without truly considering my own. I needed to prioritize my mental health above all else. Maybe I should create some distance, I mused aloud. I need to figure out if I want to continue fighting for this or if it's time to walk away. Whatever you choose, just make sure it's for you, Mark advised. You can't carry her burden, focus on your own happiness. That night I finally returned home with a renewed sense of clarity. I needed to confront Natalie again, but this time it would be different. It was time to set boundaries and express what I truly wanted moving forward. When I found her in the living room, I took a deep breath and sat down across from her. "We need to talk," I began, my tone serious. Her eyes widened and I could see the apprehension wash over her. "What is it?" "I've been thinking a lot. I appreciate the efforts you're making, but I need to be honest with you about where I stand," I said firmly. "Okay," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I can't keep living in limbo. I need to know if I want to continue this marriage, and to do that I think we need some distance," I explained. "I'm not ready to jump back into things, and I can't keep pretending everything is fine." Her expression fell, and I could see the hurt flashing across her face. "Is this really what you want? To push me away?" "It's not about pushing you away. It's about figuring out what I truly want," I replied. "I need space to think and heal. If you're genuinely committed to changing, then this distance may help us both." Tears filled her eyes as she nodded slowly. "I understand. I just wish it didn't have to be this way." "Me too," I said, trying to soften my tone. "But I have to think about my own mental health. I hope you can respect my need for space." As I left the room, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. I had taken a significant step toward reclaiming my own happiness, but it also felt like I was closing the door on something I once cherished. The days that followed were challenging. I avoided most direct contact with Natalie, focusing instead on my own journey. I spent time with Mark, pursued hobbies, and even started journaling to process my feelings. It was cathartic, and I started to feel more in control of my life. But there were moments when I'd hear her moving around or see her texts pop up on my phone. I felt the urge to reach out and comfort her, to reassure her that everything would be okay, but I knew better. I couldn't allow myself to slip back into old patterns, not when I was finally starting to find clarity. After a week of distance, I decided it was time to check in. I sent a brief text to Natalie. "How are you holding up?" Her response came quickly. "I'm trying to work on myself. It's hard, but I want to be better for you." I felt a mix of emotions flood in: hope, guilt, and uncertainty. I had taken a step back to heal, but the truth was I still loved her. The question loomed large: could I forgive? As I pondered this, I realized that the next few days would be crucial. I needed to decide whether I wanted to give our marriage another chance or if it was time to let go of a love that had turned bitter. The ball was in my court, and I knew I had to make a decision soon. The next few days passed in a blur of introspection and decision-making. I spent a lot of time contemplating my feelings, balancing the love I still had for Natalie against the pain of her betrayal. The separation had given me space, but it was also making me confront the reality of what had happened and what I truly wanted moving forward. I continued to check in with Mark, who had become a crucial pillar of support. "You've been through so much, Jake," he said during one of our conversations. "Whatever you decide, remember that your happiness comes first. It's your life, and you deserve to live it without the weight of this betrayal." His words resonated deeply as I wrestled with my emotions. I had loved Natalie fiercely, and part of me wanted to see her efforts succeed. But I also knew that reconciliation couldn't happen if I didn't feel entirely ready to trust her again. One evening, I sat down to write in my journal. I poured out my heart, reflecting on my journey with Natalie, from the joyful moments to the painful betrayal. I wrote about my hopes for the future and what it would mean for me to start anew, whether that meant with her or without her. As I wrote, a sense of clarity began to wash over me. I realized that while love could be powerful, it wouldn't heal the wounds of betrayal without trust. And trust, I discovered, was something that could take time and genuine effort to rebuild. After several days apart, I felt it was essential to have one last conversation with Natalie. I needed to communicate where I stood after all this reflection, so I reached out and asked if we could meet. When we sat down together, I felt a mix of anxiety and determination. Natalie looked nervous, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I'm really glad you wanted to talk," she said, her voice filled with apprehension. Me too, I replied, taking a deep breath. I've had a lot of time to think since we last spoke, and I wanted to share my thoughts. Her eyes widened, and I could see the desperation for reassurance etched across her face. Okay, she said softly, I'm listening. I appreciate the effort you've been putting into your therapy and your commitment to change, I began. But I've realized something important over the past week. While I still care about you, I can't ignore the ramifications of what happened. Trust is not something that can just be rebuilt overnight. I know, she replied, tears beginning to pool in her eyes. I regret everything I did. I never wanted to hurt you. I believe you, I said, but I need to be honest with myself. I've been battling between the hope of what we had and the reality of the betrayal. The truth is, I don't know if I can move forward with you in a romantic relationship. Her expression crumpled, and I felt a wave of sadness wash over me. This was hard for both of us. Jake, please just give me a chance. I can prove to you that I'm committed to changing, she pleaded. I understand that you want to, and I appreciate your willingness to fight for us, I said gently. But I have to prioritize my own mental well-being. I need to step away from this relationship for now. Maybe forever. The tears streamed down her face as I spoke, and it broke my heart to see her like that. I can't believe this is happening, she said, her voice breaking. I thought we could work it out. Part of me wishes we could, I admitted, but the damage has been done and I can't ignore how I feel. I need to take care of myself first. You deserve happiness too, and it might not be with me. In that moment, I felt a sense of finality wash over me. I had made my decision, and while it hurt, it was empowering to stand firm in my truth. I hope you find what you're looking for, Natalie, I said softly, the words catching in my throat. I truly do. As we parted ways, I felt the weight of the world lift off my shoulders. It wasn't easy, and the pain of breaking up still lingered, but I knew this was the right decision for both of us. I had taken control of my life, and it felt liberating. In the weeks that followed, I focused on healing. I threw myself into work and started picking up hobbies I had neglected during our marriage. I explored new interests and began to rediscover who I was outside of the relationship. I found comfort in being single and learned to embrace the freedom it offered. I spent more time with Mark, who had been a steady source of support. We explored hiking trails, went to concerts, and laughed over drinks. The more time I spent investing in myself, the more I felt like I was reclaiming my life. As I moved forward, I reflected on what I had learned from the experience. I realized that love alone wasn't enough to sustain a relationship. Trust, honesty, and communication were equally vital. I had to stand up for myself and prioritize my own needs. In the end, I understood that heartbreak was a part of life, but it didn't define me. I emerged stronger, more resilient, and ready to embrace whatever the future held. And while I would always carry the scars from my relationship with Natalie, I also carried hope for new beginnings. I learned to trust myself and my instincts, realizing that true love starts with loving yourself first. It was a lesson that would guide me through the next chapters of my life, whatever they may be.